You're listening to Parasearch Radio, news, views and reviews from the world of the paranormal from across the UK and beyond. Find us on Facebook, Twitter and the World Wide Web. Parasearch UK Radio. Parasearch Radio, broadcasting to the UK and beyond.
The views and opinions expressed by presenters and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Parasearch Radio or its affiliates and sponsors. Listener discretion is advised.
Good evening and welcome to the Paranormal Pop-Up Show. My name is Kerry Greenaway and normally you're used to hearing our lovely Penny G. Morgan talking all about history, but tonight is a little different because our very own Penny is actually away at the moment. So I'm joined in the studio firstly by Mr. Paul Rook. Good evening, Paul.
Good evening, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you. I've got the lovely Jolene.
Good evening, second time in a row this week.
Oh, that's exciting times.
It won't be the last.
And we have the founder himself, Mr. Richard Clements. Good evening, Richard.
Good evening, guys.
Woo! We're on a
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much.
We've actually taken over Penny's slot, so we need to, just so you guys know, we need to just mention history occasionally, just like throw the word in there, just to keep her happy. Random.
I sort of thought I'd come on to make sure, Penny's slot remains intact by the time and we leave it. So,
history. Anyway, what topic are we talking about this week? Right, I've been watching a program. It's a Netflix series, and it's called The Good Place, and it's about someone who a group of people that die. And they go to a good place, but it's not actually the good place. It's a fake good place. It's very involved, very not. But this question came up in it. When you have a near-death experience, does it then change you as a person ethically? So do you then take that experience and go, oh, my life was so bad beforehand. I need to become a good person. And it got me thinking. And we all know what happens when I start thinking. It all goes a little bit wrong. We end up with a pop-up show like this one. Now, I've had a near-death experience. So has Joe, I know. Have you guys had a near-death experience?
No.
Myself, personally, no.
So first of all, right, let's have a look at Joe's. Joe, let's talk about your near-death experience. What happened to you?
Well, I've been suffering with a spinal injury. Well, I say a spinal injury. Yeah, it was a spinal injury. I had herniated L5 in my back, which basically is the root nerve compression, which was compressing the root nerve into my right-hand side of my legs. So couldn't walk and had that for probably around about 9 months before I had my operation. In 2017, I went to the Clayton Hospital in Sheffield and I went with a friend. And it was only supposed to be a day case as it was. And I went in first thing in the morning, had my operation, which was fine, came out of the operation and I was shaking uncontrollably. And all I remember was shaking and a nurse saying to me, I just need you to breathe. I need you to breathe. And with that, it was just like, I can't even remember what really, really happened. However, somebody said to me, I just remember looking at the nurse and saying, I don't feel very well. And it was literally like somebody had switched the lights out. But as soon as everything had gone black, I went into what I can only describe as a waiting room. It was all bright white, and there was a man in a suit with what looked like a clipboard. And he said to me, we're not ready for you yet. And I said, well, I want to stay. I want to be here. I want to stay. He said, no, we're not ready for you yet. You need to go back. We've got better things planned for you. And I said, well, considering where I am at this precise moment in time in my life, I would much rather stay here. And they actually said no. And before he could say anything else, I woke up in the bed with the nurse with the paddles round me and about 20 people around me and the consultant who'd just operated on me. And when I asked him what had happened, they said that they'd lost me and they brought me back and asked me how I was feeling. And I said, I'm absolutely fine. But then started to ask more and more questions about why it had happened and what had happened. And apparently they'd given me a drug to bring me out of the anaesthetic that had reacted quite badly with the morphine that they'd given me.
Right.
So, yeah, so that's what happened to me.
Do you think, looking at that experience, because I've had a near-death experience too, but mine was slightly different because I was talking to my nan, and it was in the flat, and her flat, and I remember it so vividly. It's almost like a memory rather than a hallucination or a dream, you know. Mm-hmm. But I had a choice. She said, so what do you want to do? Do you want to stay or do you want to go? And I went, well, I want to stay because I like the kids. And she said, right, that's it. And it ended and I came back and then I got well really quickly after that. So for me, I felt like it was my choice. Whereas for you, they were telling you that it wasn't your time to move on, right? Mm-hmm. Do you think it was a hallucination? Body shutting down, senses?
No, there must have been something totally different for me. It definitely wasn't a hallucination. I wasn't as far as I knew, there was just no heartbeat, there was nothing. And they did everything they could to bring me back. Uh-huh. And the only reason I know that is because my friend was screaming down the hallway, I can't believe you've let her die. I can't believe you've let her do this. And so, yeah, that's, you know, to me, it was so real, but it was them. I said, I want to stay. And they said, no, but I believe now everybody's got their own time. And if it had been my time, they would have let me stay.
Did it change
but it wasn't.
You?
It gave me a better outlook on life because obviously going through personal turmoil and, you know, still going through, you know, divorce and God knows what else. It kind of made me have a little bit more of a positive outlook on life. To the point it was, I kind of looked at it and I thought I might not be here. If they'd let me stay, I wouldn't have been here. So that kind of turned my life around, thinking about that. And it kind of made me realize as well that, you know, life is too short. And I know people use that saying, so blasé type. It did make me realize that my life is far too short and it goes by in the blink of an eye. And, you know, it's just, that's what I think anyway.
Didn't that just sort of put it into perspective that how small we are in compared to like the whole cosmos and things like that, that your problems are not really that much of a big deal?
Yeah, I think with any... Yeah, for me, it was kind of like I knew everything was, you know, when you hit that rock bottom and you're in that frame of mind where you actually feel like you do not want to go on. And I'm not scared of admitting that, you know, I did feel like that. And, you know, the only people that matter to me at that point in time were my children. And, you know, yeah, I'm so insignificant in respect of those two. They are my main priority. And if I weren't here, who would actually look after them? And that's all I thought was, you know, after I came round, it was like, oh my God, what would have happened if I'd have died?
Yeah.
See, for me, because it was it felt like a choice whether I stayed or go at that point, having that conversation, because for me it felt a choice. Again, you're right. It came down to the kids. Who would have the kids? You know, that was my priority at that moment. Now, I believe the choice I made was to come back and continue. But I think if I'd chosen the other, that it would have been easily either or, if that makes sense.
But then again, with your situation, would you not think? Well, I mean, I personally thinking this, but isn't it almost like your brain pretty much wants to know which direction you want to go? Do you want to just give up, or are you going to carry on fighting? If you're going to fight, your brain wants to know whether it's fighting or not.
Yeah, that's a possibility. I can't discount. It could have been a massive hallucination for me because it was an illness, not a trauma situation.
Yeah.
It came through illness. I was that ill. And I had musical ear syndrome, which I recognise for what it was now. But at the time, I wasn't recognising that. It could easily have been hallucination. Excuse me. But, you know, I think the key point for me was how quickly I recovered once I made that choice. Yes, you can say mind over matter. You've made the decision to carry on, so you physically get on with it.
So the brain... Yeah. So the brain is like, right, okay, then let's get this job done.
Yeah.
Right, she wants to survive this.
Possibly.
Let's do this.
But near-death experiences happen in so many different ways, don't they? I mean, for me, I would class that as a near-death experience. I didn't see a light at the end of the tunnel or any of that because I was ill. So I was in and out of consciousness. I wasn't with it at all. But for me, that was still a near-death experience because I had to choose between life or death. Do I move on into the afterlife or do I come back to life and continue this mortal coil with my children? Do you know what I mean? But for Joe, that was very different, wasn't it? It was a physical
out of
thing.
my control. It was just, it was because obviously they'd given me something, 2 medications that had reacted with each other. So that wasn't my choice. It wasn't my doing, and I was perfectly fine. I was shaking, but that was it, and it was. That wasn't my choice, and it was basically when I got there. I think that's why they said to me it wasn't my time.
Yeah, because it was somebody else's fault.
It was somebody else's choice that you came back, not your choice.
Yeah. But then I do think that happened for a reason because since all of that happened, I had so much more of a positive outlook on life, and then the calls started to come in. So the TV shows, obviously the radio show, everything, you know, everything started to fit into place. Everything that I was told previously was not who I was. Do you know what I mean? It's without going into obviously personal things, but when you go in that, when you have a relationship that is very controlling and very manipulative and very abusive, and you get that, you kind of think to yourself, you're actually brainwashed into that sort of mindset where you actually think that it's you actually think, am I this horrible person? And the amount of times that I sat there and tried to convince myself that I wasn't, it wasn't until I'd had that I realised, no, actually, Joe, it's not you who's got the problem. It's not you with the issue. And that's when I finally, the penny actually dropped. And then it was then that I started to talk to, you know, somebody about what had happened. And I've kind of understood why things had happened that way.
So afterwards, you admit that your outlook post-event, because this is actually the bit I want to kind of examine, is the post-event. See, I kind of was looking at this today, and I was looking at it and going, the near-death experience that people have, no matter what experience, how the experience happened for them, short-term, and I'm talking like within 2-3 years, the effect of the near-death experience seems to fade off. So whether or not, for me, it was a lifestyle choices. I came out going, I need to be healthier, I need to look after my weight more, I need to look after, my lifestyle choices, what I'm eating and stuff, but mainly my eating was the issue, because you know how I react when I'm stressed. We all know how I react when I'm stressed. It's all a bit dodgy. And I lose weight.
It's a whole new show.
It's a completely different psychological assessment, that one. But that's how I deal with stress, and that ultimately led to my illness, which ultimately led to that experience. So for me, when I came off the back of it, I was like, right, okay, I've decided from that point, I'm going to take on this challenge and come on from that experience, but so I can do the best job for my children, I've got to be healthier. I've got to be able to, be healthy, so I can raise the boys to their life, into their life, and then we'll worry about everything else later. So for me, it was all about the boys and bringing it forward and stuff like that. So I made healthier life choices. Now, bearing in mind, that experience I had was quite a while ago now. I'm not going to say I deal with stress any better. I can't say I gave up smoking, because I did for a few years and then I went back to it. My drinking, I do like a drink, but nowhere near the level I probably was at that time. Do you know what I mean? And so my lifestyle choices have settled back to more I'd say medium level. They're balanced. Balanced. Yeah, they're balanced. Yeah, whereas at the time they weren't. It was, I lived on cigarettes and alcohol up until that point, which is really quite probably why I got so ill. But, hey-ho, you live and learn. So for me, making that choice improved my lifestyle choices going forward. But I would say I'm probably nowhere near as healthy as I probably was coming off the back of that illness when I got well. Do you know what I mean? So it was a short-term effect of a near-death experience. Me as a person hasn't changed. I haven't gone, well, I really need to become a really super good person and change the environment and, do loads of things for charity. And, I haven't fundamentally changed my character because of the experience, the near-death experience I believe I had. For you, did it fundamentally change? And that's more what I wanted to discuss tonight, is whether or not it's the fundamental, is the near-death experience, does that have that fundamental effect on you as a person to change yourself into a better person? Or is it more of a short-term thing?
I think it does, though, because, I mentioned to you the other night about my mum having a serious car accident, where my mum was left embedded in a garden. My mum died. She had exactly the same thing, but obviously through a different experience. But the thing is, with my mum was very, very maternal. My mum was very, very giving. And my mum, when she came out of hospital after 9 months, she was of the essences, I am going to do what I want to do, and I'm going to live my life. And I think that's kind of what the message portrays, though, doesn't it? When you have a near-death experience like that, or a death experience, whichever one you want to call it. But I think when that happens, you have to change coming out of that, because we all take life for granted, don't we? You never know when it's going to be snatched away from you, and you definitely don't.
Boys?
But then, going through that sort of incident, having that experience, it does put it into perspective, and it makes you realise how it is. I've not had that experience, but I have been on scene giving CPR to runners and things of races and whatnot. So I see it from that point of view. So it's, I get to see how, easy it is for someone to lose their life.
Yeah, when I was sort of like looking this up and stuff, I mean, the the general sort of trait and train and I've got is this sort of experience when people does it is sort of life changing, but not so much on an outward level. It's an inward level, a more spiritual level. I mean, they don't actually sort of turn into churchgoers and sort of stuff like that. It's more of a subtle sort of inward sort of spiritual sort of change, and their outlook on life actually sort of changes. And from what I could gather, I mean, this does last with people for probably the rest of their lives. I mean, and you were saying, Kerry, that, you know, does it sort of wear off after a couple of years? Possibly in some people. Perhaps you have to maintain that sort of sense you've been given. I mean, and if you don't work on it and continually sort of revisit it, well, not the near-death experience, but sort of work on this spirituality that's been given to you, then it probably will wane. But for the majority, from what I could tell, they do sort of continue with it and sort of live quite productive and fulfilling lives.
I know.
I do also think that if you've got a non-believer in the afterlife and then they have a near-death experience and they see the whole tunnel, light at the end of the tunnel, when they get there, there's, I don't know, Jesus or their family passed over members and things like that. People like to believe what they see. And if they believe that they have seen that, then that's proof to them that there is an afterlife. Mm-hmm. And they have seen it. They have experienced it. So they're going to, when they come back around, they're going to say, I see, I know my dead nan or whatever. And they will go with that that sort of feeling. And they will then start believing in an afterlife because they have seen it.
Yeah, well, it's quite interesting that, though, isn't it? When you see people who are actually dying or passing away, they actually talk about people who have come to the side of the beds and things like that. So that in mind, you know, I remember my ex's grandpa passing away in 2016, and we were at the hospice, and he was absolutely fine. But so 3 days later, he was gone. But as he was in one of his moments of, I want to say, lucidness, he was talking about his parents. He was talking about people who he'd not seen for a long time coming to the side of his bed and talking to him. And the nurse, you know, had to humour him. But that's the one thing that I will never forget, because when I walked into the room, I saw all these people around his bed. And it was like, oh, wow, I can feel there's so much love in this room. And it was so strange. I'd never felt anything like that before.
I have to say, when my granddad, I didn't have this experience. This is my mum. She told me about it. She had been to visit my granddad, and he had a fright. That's the only way she can explain it. She goes, he looked past me at the window and went, "No, I'm not ready yet." And then that actually triggered a fit, which put him in hospital. And it was a 3-day thing. 3 days later, he passed. And my mum swears to this day that he saw my nan. And that scared him so much because he was fearful of death. He didn't have a belief system. And she swears he saw my nan come to get him. And that's and he went, "I'm not ready yet." And that was the trigger that put him on the final furlong.
See, before I started,
and then he passed.
Before I started looking into obviously near-death experiences and things like this, and the paranormal as a whole, you know that I'm quite into my movies and stuff, and I think the best film I've ever seen that can put this into perspective for some people is City of Angels.
Yeah, that's great.
Have you ever seen that?
Yeah, it's great.
Basically, it is. Basically, you've got especially mainly around hospitals and things. You had angels, but no one could see them except when they would die. When people were dying, they would be there to help calm the person dying. They would then, once they died, they took the person, they took them through the light at the end of the tunnel and helped them pass on.
Yeah, it's like
I thought that was quite a good idea.
Yeah, it was like the same Stairway to Heaven, though, wasn't it? As well, with the American actors, they used to do that as well, and they used to appear as angels and help to cross people over at the same time.
But there's one thing in my research I sort of like looked at, and this sort of like near-death experiences are certainly culturally driven. You know, in the West, people tend to see angelic beings, etc., and sort of like in the East, the Hindus and stuff, they will see things more connected to their belief systems. You know, and they have a specific deity or something that represents death, and they will sort of have conversations with them. So there's certainly some sort of cultural element attached to it. So
I agree with that to a point, because I think it's also down to interpretation. What I might see as an angel might not be what, I don't know, an American would see. They would see an old family member, for example. Do you know what I mean? So I think it is also down to interpretation of what you're actually seeing.
Yeah,
possibly.
Because
Belief system. I believe that there is life after life. I believe my family members continue even without their body, you know, their physical body. I believe that is a belief system I have. So for me to see my nan or, you know, one of my grandparents or something is not out of the realms of my belief system. I'm not a religious person in regards to Jesus or, you know, that kind of thing. So for me, it kind of made sense. But then if you're passing from one realm, we'll say realm, from the physical into a different realm, you know, spiritual realm, they're going to try and make that transition as easy for you as possible. So they are going to buy into your belief system to help you make that transition, surely.
But then, as you said, with like guardian angel, like your guardians, you talk about that all the time in different aspects. You've got your guardian angel or whatever. Now, a lot of people will say their guardian is their nan or their granddad or another family member. I don't see that.
No.
I wouldn't say that a dead relative would be... I mean, okay, they might be there for guidance, but
that
they're
doesn't
not
make
my
them a
guardian angel.
Yeah. Carry on.
So it just means something different to me. That's all I'm saying. So again, it just brings you down to that interpretation.
Well, that's true. I just want to refer to the chat room because thank you so much, everybody, for entering the chat room. Don't forget, guys, if you are listening, there's a little speech bubble down the bottom. Just click on that. It takes you into the chat room. You might have to sign in, but that's absolutely fine. That leads you into our chat room so you can be part of this discussion. And
it's all free.
Obviously, it's free. And I'm just going to say history, just to keep our lovely Penny happy.
Everybody's got a history, haven't they? So
exactly.
These near-death experiences we're talking about has happened in the history.
Well, no, the earliest recorded near-death experience is Plato and his work, The Republic, in 360 BC, and he mentions a soldier who passes in battle and goes up to be judged, but then he returns to his body to resume the fight. So there you go, a bit of history there for you.
Awesome. We love a bit of history on a Wednesday, is all I can say. I didn't know that, Richard. Well done, is all I'm saying. Anyway, let's have a
do your research, dear.
Cheeky sod.
Yeah, let's go to the chat room. Anyway.
Right, let's have a quick look at the chat room because we are having quite a lot of interaction in the chat room. Karen Frey has said she had a serious car accident, was knocked unconscious, broken bones, had to be cut out of the car, and she shouldn't really have survived. Now, out of that, she did make her look at her outlook on life and be thankful, actually, having that gratitude. We talk about gratitude in spiritual terms quite a lot, and that increased that for her. That actually changed that within herself, that fundamental change. And then you've got Carl. Hi, Carl, Carl Hutchinson, my lovely Carl. Lost. Now this is awful, but very, very common. He lost both parents in a very short period of time, and being there at the end for both parents changed his outlook. So witnessing that experience as well as being the experience has a fundamental effect on you, doesn't it?
It does, and that's what I was saying when obviously when I was doing the St John work, and we had that incident where the runner collapsed down, literally dead, and we had to do the CPR. It does put it into perspective how fragile life is.
It's like with me, I've never actually been in the presence of anyone that's actually passed, and I'm sort of, quite mature in years now, but I've never sort of like been confronted with that. So, it's probably something I've got to wait to actually sort of like experience before I can sort of get the full sort of like, well, say benefit. That's not the sort of like correct word.
Well,
but
let's just hope you don't ever have to experience it.
No.
Right. Let's look at that concept, because we started it with near-death experiences, which is very personal for us. But we all have to face the death process, whether that's ourselves, whether that's our parents, people around us. I know in my younger years, in my teenage years, when I was clubbing, I had to face a suicide. Not mine, obviously, because I'm still here, but a friend of mine committed suicide, and there was a build-up to that where it actually happened to the point where they passed, and that was really hard.
It is hard though, isn't it? Because when that happens, I dealt with that when I was in Faliraki, but I had a phone. It was a really strange phone call, actually, and this person used to always come into my mum and dad's pub, and he was the person that I would always talk to. He was not your conventional character. He was, he had tattoos on his head. He was a biker. He always used to come into the pub and say to me, by the way, I was about 18 or 19 at this point, Joe, when we getting married? And I used to say 15th of December 2078. And he went, why is that then? And I was like, because I'll be dead by then. So just then, it's like I got 200 years, and automatically I said I'm going to die when I'm 100. So that's a bit strange, but it was. I'll never forget it to this day. It was the 15th of October, and I got this really strange phone call on my English mobile, and he actually said who it was, and I spoke to him, and he sounded a bit tipsy, and it was so out of the blue and so random, and all of a sudden I just said, are you okay? And he said, yeah, I'll be good, I'll be fine, don't worry about me. And those were the final words that he said to me. And then it wasn't until I arrived back in the UK on the 21st of October that my parents told me that he'd done what he'd done. And I was devastated, to be honest, because he was such a lovable rogue. He was just so lovely. But, I've lost so many people recently as well. Like my aunt passed away about 18 months ago, and my uncle's just recently passed away as well. And it's just like my cousin is only 38, and he's lost both his parents now. And, having to watch my cousin go through everything. I mean, he's taken it like an absolute trooper, and he's got his loving wife and his children and her family around him, and his stepmom and everybody. And it's madness how people do react to certain things like that.
Death is one of the hardest. It's one of the most. There are two sure things in life, they say, isn't there? And one of those is you're going to die. Right.
And the other one's taxes, isn't it?
Correct, Richard. Well done. So it is something we all have to face, whether or not it's our own death or it's somebody we love or care about's death. And it is a fundamental fact of life, but it does change you. It does have an effect. Carl, as I say, is in the chat room. He said that... he's had both parents pass very quickly within, a time span. And it's that support, I think, that then is not there anymore. But they are there, but they're not there. You know what I mean? They're not physically there. And at the moment, I kind of want to kill my child. But you know what I mean? It does have that fundamental effect on you. And it's something that although we know we have to face, we kind of do the head in bucket sand kind of scenario, and we all say things like, make the most of people while they're here, buy flowers for people while they're here, not when they're dead, and that sort of thing. These changes, these massive fundamental to our existence changes that we go through, whether or not it's a personal thing that's happened to you through a near-death experience, or whether it's happened to somebody that you know and love, and then that's affected you in that grieving process, it does have that fundamental change. So, question on the table was, near-death experiences or death experiences, do they change you fundamentally, ethically, for the better?
I think they do.
Yeah, I think they do as well.
They've got to have some effect on you.
I should imagine by the very definition, and if you experience someone, it must have an effect on you. And
does it have
I can't,
because it doesn't always.
No, I mean, there are a very small percentage of near-death experiences which are quite disturbing. Yes. And I was reading some of the accounts. I mean, some people, especially in the West, and if you're of like a Christian mindset, they will visit hell. Mm-hmm. And that is accompanied with everything. But it's a very small percentage, but it still
has a positive outlook, though, doesn't it? Because people have good experiences, then become more spiritual on some of their outlooks. But then,
do they become more spiritual, or is it, I don't.
In the respect of belief, believing in afterlife and stuff, then yeah, I think they do. But then that's sort of a good influence. But then if they see hell, again, they're going to change for the better, surely, because they might not want to end up there.
Well,
so they're going to try and...
That's a big leap. I mean, I think some people, and if they experience that would have a sort of like a profound effect on them. Whether it would actually sort of push them to be good and everything, I don't actually know. It would probably just put them in fear for the rest of their existence or the rest of their lives. I mean, and that sort of can't be sort of like a good sort of mindset to have.
I think if you had a bad near-death experience, then that is going to, first of all, scare the crap out of you. Mm-hmm. And that, I would think, would ethically make you consider your choices better.
Yeah.
The choices
so
you make. We all know the differences between good and bad, in life.
Yeah.
Do you lie to somebody? Do you screw someone over for money? Do you, I don't know, ethical choices occur daily. So, when we look at ethics, you do change. So if you had a bad near-death experience, which I'm lucky enough to say I've never had one of those, but, mine was very positive because I saw my nan at the end of the day, who I love dearly. But if you'd had a bad near-death experience, it's going to scare you. That's going to scare you, regardless of your belief system. If your belief system is you're going to go to hell, mm-hmm. you're going to change. Do you know what I mean? You're going to change.
But then, as you said, it could have a better influence on you in the respect of making the right choices.
But this is sort of like could, should, or would. I mean, it could have the total opposite effect, and the person and particular and individuals affected will say, "Oh well, there's nothing at the end of this, so I might as well do what I want." Take all the money and run, so to speak, and sort of like it could have a real sort of impact on how they conduct themselves toward.
No, I kind of think if you'd had that bad experience, you'd then kind of not want to not go there. You wouldn't want to go down that road. I think you would ethically start considering your choices better. And it's not the choice. It's everyone can make a choice to do a good or a good or a bad thing. The choice isn't so much your choice and how it's going to affect you, because I could go down Rubber Bank and absolutely be rolling in money and be happy as Larry. The impact it would have on other people is what needs to be considered. And that is the fundamental yardstick of whether or not you're a good person or a bad person. because a lot of choices that you make, if you are honest before you make a choice, you can solve a lot of crap before it happens, people.
But you know what? As a race, as a human, we automatically have what's called this sense of fairness.
Yes.
We expect everybody else to have the same sense of fairness that we have.
But that's a sense of expectation,
yeah.
and isn't that based on what your growth, where you grew up, your
yeah.
learning experiences come from? Isn't that where that comes from?
Yeah, but not everybody has that though, do they? So when they're having these near-death experiences and they potentially see death or anything like that, is it because they've not had this moral sense of fairness? Is that what it is?
That could be sort of like, I've just come out of a period, I mean, Kerry and Paul could probably vouch for this. I won't go into it too much, but feeling a bit negative and a bit down and unfair and sort of stuff, and letting stuff get on top of me and stuff. But, and it does, and it can sort of affect you in quite a sort of a negative way. But fortunately now I've sort of managed to sort of put a lid on that with some help and some advice, and sort of move forward with it, and sort of view life back and get my life view back to what it should be.
I think that's a perspective, though. I think the fundamentals of your character were not fundamentally bad.
No.
No.
You as a character, from your childhood experiences going through, build your sense of what's right and wrong and what's fair and what's not. That's where your belief systems are built. And those are fundamental truths within yourself that you grew up with. But we see people from horrendous backgrounds not having near-death experiences, but turning their life around and becoming amazingly good people, purely on experience from what they've experienced through life, not having a near-death experience. So is it about choice from fundamental experiences from a young age and learnings and belief systems that are set in a young age that affect our near-death experiences and our journey through life? Because a lot of people can blame the experiences they've had as to why they've turned to life and crime and drugs and, many other excuses. Or is it an external influence of belief system? I don't know. This one really got my brain ticking, I have to say, because I thought to myself, I made a choice through my near-death experience. I made a choice. That was what happened for me. But fundamentally, I have a very strong sense of fairness. I already had that. I already had that in place. So no matter what experience I go through, my sense of fairness is it's not fair. However, that's not my choice. That I'm feeling unfair in regards to a choice somebody else has made. Very rarely do I feel that about myself, because if I've made a choice, it's fair in my head. But then I consider a lot of different angles before I make a choice. Not everybody does that. So is that the basis? Their belief systems, which are set in generally from the years between 1 and 7 years, is that the tipping point of what occurs? If you had a very religious upbringing and was in the church, do you fundamentally go back to that when faced with a choice? I don't know. It's ethics, and this is the fascinating point. Just saying, history, just to get that in. Carry on, guys.
History, yeah. You're talking about transactional analysis there, which is an historic process. But as you were saying, Kerry, our brains are pretty much hotwired by the time we're about sort of 7 or up to about 11. And any experience we have as adults, we will go back to that time and choose our reaction or get the feelings, whatever, from the experiences we have got back from that time, and then we will draw them to our present, and then sort of go through whatever emotions and stuff you go through. And unfortunately, sort of in schools and stuff today, this isn't actually sort of taught and how to deal with that. They seem to just be more concerned, with reading, writing, yes, but I really think youngsters need to be taught how to deal with their emotions and where their emotions come from as well.
we have seen, if we look at it from that perspective, we have seen through my years, now bearing in mind I'm 50, so pretty much, might as well, give or take a few months, right? I know.
Dear.
Ouch. When I grew up, it was very C of E. I was in a C of E church, we sang hymns at lunchtime. It was very C of E based. That was I didn't go to church specifically, but, clubs and that were all based around churches and stuff like that, so that is a base underlying subconscious thing now for me. But the schooling came away from that. As we became multicultural, they came away from that so much. I mean, when my children went to school, they were singing pop songs, good pop songs. I'm not saying it's not. And then now they're starting to introduce mindfulness in. It's not religion, but it's mindful. It's positive mindset situations coming into the school now. It's done under, I can't remember the term they use for it now, but that is being brought into the schools now. So they're starting to do, how do you feel, why do you feel this, and actually acknowledging that children have emotions and feelings and examining that, and moral ethics and the right and the wrong, which kind of got lost for a few years in this multicultural. Now, this is that what it is now? Or did we lose our moral standing, our moral base between those years, through our educational system and our parenting system?
Teaching a child right from wrong, I believe, is the parents' responsibility.
I agree.
So now that has been lost because the kids know that they've got too much power over the parents these days. Now the school's taking it up. I don't think that's right at all.
No, I think what's happened is the respect has been lost along the way, and the police have no respect anymore. Parents have no respect because they don't bring their children up because there's so much red tape. I mean, my parents used to bloody belt me when I was a kid with a leather belt, I might add. And do you know what? It never did me no harm. And I brought up, with please, thank you, manners, etc. Yeah. Schools, I would never dare to talk to a teacher disrespectfully because I know for a fact I'd get either a board rubber thrown at me or a piece of chalk or even worse, my mother, which, you don't want.
Right, I'm with you.
The respect over the years has been lost. And I do think part of it is down to parents. But then again, I think part of it's the government. Part of it's, social acceptance of, there's no national service anymore. There's no instilling of respect from the peers above, is there? And it's, kids these days, I mean, God help my kids if I heard them being disrespectful to somebody.
It's like, as you say, I mean, sort of like parents in general, they seem to have sort of like given their parenting to the schools to actually do these sort of teach them and right from wrong.
But easy life though, isn't it?
But schools are governed by the government, and the government are heavily influenced by political correctness. And now, what is politically correct is not necessarily what is right and wrong.
No.
Because political and correctness changes.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, I'm with you totally. Political correctness does change, and it does influence our sociological and cultural influences. So, getting it back to topic, near-death experiences are reflective then of belief system. Are we saying that?
I would go along with that, yes. Personally.
Joe?
Yeah.
Paul?
Yeah, definitely.
Belief systems and interpretation, but yeah.
Okay.
Splinters out the backside, Paulio.
Okay, so we're kind of agreeing that sociological, cultural influences and political influences affect our belief systems between that period of time where we build our belief systems, and that has an effect on possible near-death experiences or how we view death going forward. Now, there is another factor which has been brought up in the chat room, and it's a bit controversial, this one. When you die, naturally, your body does release a chemical. It releases a chemical which eases that passing for you and can create certain circumstances to make that transition easier.
Yes, this is actually known about, and going along with that, sort of people that experience particularly near-death experiences during sort of like surgery practices and in hospitals, then this is where a lot of the studies have been done. There's always a common factor of ketamine being used in the anaesthetic process, which is known to have an hallucinogenic effect.
Right.
So
that as a physiological, we know that that's a physiological, bodily, physical response to the natural process of dying.
Yeah.
However, the hallucinations, if we're saying it's hallucinogenic, does that then build from the belief systems that are set in as a child, or is something else going on? When I've spoken to palliative care workers, they're not dying. Those people were just sitting there watching over somebody in their last hours or moments of death. The experiences that happen in that environment, and surgeons actually, when I've spoken to surgeons who don't go public, but some of the experiences that are happening under those circumstances are not necessarily linked. I say not necessarily linked. They're not obviously linked to the person that's actually going through the death experience. There are other things going on. Things like in a surgeon's room, I spoke to a surgeon a couple of years back, actually, this was now, who was talking about somebody who died on the operating table. Standard procedure operation, shouldn't have gone wrong, did go wrong. Person was flatlining. They had to deal with it. Everybody is focused on the person in front of them on the table, and the tray of equipment, which was to the side, just flew across the room. No one can explain that. They're all going, look, yeah, I don't care about that one, but we're going to, we're going to worry about the person in front of us because they're flatlining. But that happened. That was weird. People that deal in care with end-of-life care say that it is external to the person that's on the table. So are we saying then that I in my personal paranormal journey have always looked at a belief system being an externalization. That's why we get activity, because it's an externalization of ourselves onto the external environment. Are we then saying that the death experience, no matter what's going on within the brain of that person and that experience of that person on the table or in that situation, is then being externalized? Or is there an external influence coming in to the room? That's the interesting part.
That is very...
It's hard to say, really, without actually experiencing that firsthand. But I don't really want to be on the table to find out.
I know that when I had, going back to the very beginning with personal experiences, I know nothing weird was happening in the room when I had the experience with my nan and the choice I made. I know, because no one said, well, that was weird. I know that external of the event that I experienced, it was astonishing. Even the nurses were saying how quick I then recovered from my choice, if that makes sense. So I kind of had that experience, and then within 24 hours I was home. They couldn't explain that physically. They were like, that's weird. You shouldn't be up and home within 24 hours, considering we were worried you were going to pass over 24 hours ago, and now we're sending you home with the course of antibiotics and rest and keep an eye on yourself and you'll be all right. And that for them was like one of those unexplained things, but hey, we'll take it because you're surviving and you're okay.
Well, yeah,
you know what I mean?
That's
kind of how they took it. They won't question that further because physiologically, you're getting better. You're not taking up that bed in the hospital. My death hormone, if you want to look at it that way, isn't causing any more problems or hallucinations or experiences. For Jo, she went into that without expecting to pass, and the drugs they gave her reacted, which caused the situation. How soon after? Was it a quick recovery?
Yeah, I was out of hospital later that night.
That's weird. For a near-death experience, then you're home within 24 hours. And this
It happened around 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And I was home probably about 8:30, 9 o'clock. Couldn't walk, but yeah, I was home.
But they deemed you fit enough to discharge you from hospital.
Yeah, they did in tests, you name it. I was perfectly fine. Madness.
Exactly. So kind of, to me, logically, it suggests there's another force at play, not just the physical body that they're dealing with. They can only deal with the physical symptoms. I've come across other situations where, you know, you go to the doctor with a problem, and then you go through multiple tests, and basically it's a series of elimination. So you'll have a test for this, you'll have a test, right, okay, that's not showing any abnormal results, that's not showing any abnormal results, that's not. It's this process of elimination. But then all of a sudden, you get to the point where you're at that point of death, but then something happens within your mind, whether that's hormonally driven or whether that's something extra going on. And then within 24 hours of that experience, you're then home because you've lived. You've made a choice. You've lived. Jo made a choice. She made a choice saying, I don't want to go back. But somebody said, no, actually, you need to go back. I made a personal choice. I said, I need to go back. I was bloody minded. You know what I mean? I'm going back. But it's just a question. It just makes it more interesting to me that you can't always put it down to physiological, psychological. An experience happens, it changes you fundamentally, whether you witness it or whether you go through it on a death experience, and where that comes from. And that is what fascinates me. And for me, when I came out of hospital and when I sat there, and I remember that, and I remember it so vividly, as I'm sure Jo does, and I'm sure anybody else who's had a near-death experience does, for me, that reaffirmed life goes on.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And that is paranormal. And on that note,
until they prove it, and then it's natural.
And we've had to come to the end of the show, guys. History.
Okay. History.
Yeah.
Now the show is in past tense. It's now history.
Yes, that's
we are
right.
now
We're
in
coming
history.
to an end.
And next week, Penny will be back in the studio, taking over the realms of her show. And
she's got to clear up all the wine bottles, isn't she?
Well, she's got to clear up the studio a little bit, because by the time she comes back, it's going to be properly rolling with bottles on the floor, is all I'm going to say. No, seriously. Penny is back next week. She has got an astonishing lineup for you next week. I want hands up here. Has anybody listened to, or watched, should I say, Helia?
No.
What?
Where have you been? You haven't been listening to Kerry for the last year or so.
6 months, 7 months.
It's on Netflix.
I watched the first 10 minutes. I think.
It's on YouTube. Go check Helia out. One of the guys involved in that is actually on the show with Penny next week. I'm not going to say any more on that. I'm going to leave that little treat to Penny to tell you all who is on and what they're talking about next week. But all I'm saying is, it's a cracker. I'm very excited. It's a cracker of a show.
Oh, you can be lurking around in the background.
A little excited.
Yeah, she's doing the studio next week.
I've said to Penny, I'm doing the studio next week. Anyway, what else is occurring this week on Parasearch Radio? Well, we are on Wednesday. That means tomorrow night we actually have, what do we have? Because I'm on the wrong week. We have PSH Radio with Carl and Sam, with Mr. Sandman himself. He is a paranormal podcaster, amazing researcher, thoroughly knowledgeable about the paranormal, kicking off 9 p.m. tomorrow night. And then on Friday evening, the Dark Mirror Show with myself, Mark, and Carl are talking about paranormal eBay.
Oh, God. That buying thing.
Yeah.
That sounds great.
What can you buy? What can you buy? I want you all going out and checking out eBay and seeing what you can find to do with the paranormal on eBay. And we're going to discuss that. That's huge business. Paranormal eBay, haunted eBay.
I bet they end up with talking about paranormal Asda's or Tesco's or something instead of eBay.
I do know the last time I looked on eBay, there was 889 paranormal haunted dolls for sale.
Oh, for God's sake.
Awesome.
I know,
brilliant.
Right?
So many people jumping on the bandwagon of these haunted items.
Oh, this is a concept we're going to be looking at on Friday evening. Until then, join us tomorrow evening, 9 p.m. in the studio, live and kicking with Carl and Sam. Tomorrow evening, Sandman is in the studio. If you miss any of our shows, don't forget you can pop over to our YouTube channel. We have 2 channels over there. We have Archive Parasearch and Parasearch Radio, where the latest shows go up. So if you miss any, well, they're all over there. Go over there, click like, share and subscribe. And blogs. If you go over to parasearch.org, you can check out all the blogs on Parasearch Radio, as well as check out the team, find out all about us, see our Twitter feeds, all sorts of things on the Parasearch website. The latest blog that has just gone up, and I'm just going to give a little shout out to my amazing son, 15 years of age. He's hitting the paranormal from a very, very early age, is what I'm going to say. He has very strong opinions on it already. He knows things I don't know already. He's written a blog. He's written it. I haven't edited that at all. It came through. Me and Paul looked at it, and we literally posted it as read. And he's 15. And on that note, go check it out. Thanks, guys, for joining me in the studio. Say good night, guys.
Good night.
Good night, guys.
Good night, guys.
Hope you enjoyed the discussion. 9 p.m. tomorrow night. Join us live, Parasearch Radio. Good night.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to join us for more shows throughout the week. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, and the World Wide Web to keep up to date with all the shows right here on Parasearch Radio.